Finally doing this one. I've been intending to do it for months now, but I haven't because either when I'd have it scheduled, something more pressing would suddenly spring up, like the Legacy Evolution reveals, or more often than not, I just forget because I'm an idiot. You know, normal perspective stuff, honestly. And then, these last few weeks happened, and I just could not get this out when I wanted. But I'm here now, so let's actually do this. Welcome to What's the Best? What's the best Legacy Wave 1 figure? And Wave 1 of Legacy is weird. I don't think a wave of toys has ever looked so bad from the outside, and then been so good when you finally got it. Legacy Wave 1's baseline, much like Siege's overall, was like a 7 out of 10. But upon its initial reveal, I would have put money on its best figure maybe getting that high in the ratings, with the real average being like a 3. To be clear, I'm happy to have been wrong about that. In no particular order because I don't wanna. Blaster and Hot Rod don't count. They were from the last wave of Kingdom, and even if Hot Rod was in this video, he'd be last place. And Galvatron is a repack, so that ain't going in here either. So let's just start out with Optimus Prime. Right off the bat, we're having problems with this format. Really highlighting one of the reasons I've been feeling down about using the What's the Best format to talk about whole toy lines. What's the Best just wasn't meant for this. I did it because people asked me to, but I designed it to figure out what the best representation of a specific character was. As a result, if I'm covering a toy line where they're doing their own thing at all, ratings like accuracy can become superfluous to specific characters, and then still matter to others. Like, the point of What's the Best isn't to find some arbitrary best figure out of a bunch that you will ultimately end up getting, it's to find one where you can say, I have this one, I don't need more. I can be done collecting this character and move on to another because I have the definitive version of them. So here, where characters like Kickback are accurate, but Optimus isn't, the format is now actually a problem. I have to downgrade characters like Optimus to looks good, which is subjective, rather than it being accurate, which is something that you can quantify. Though, I do find this version of Optimus looks cool. And to clear it up with people who are way too pissed at me for stupid reasons, yes, I do understand that Laser Prime is not a real character. I do understand that it's actually Optimus Prime and not some separate non-existent dude called Laser Prime. I was just saying that I like to think of this as a separate guy called Laser Prime. Because in the Chaos on Velocitron box set, he was listed on the box as Laser Prime, not Laser Optimus Prime, Laser Prime. And since I'd never heard of the figure beforehand, the conclusion I drew back then was that it was a new character. I don't understand why so many people were mad about that, calling me a moron and everything. Like, fucking chill, guys. I had figured out my error by that point, but I still like to think of this figure as a different guy. But I know he's not. Anyways, that's 500 words of unimportant before we get to this What's the Best. The figure looks good at least standing still, though when getting into posing, it starts to fall apart because of the stupid shoulder pylon's static nature. That part also negatively impacts the rating on the posing, as it's in the way of the shoulders doing a lot of what you want. And ultimately, that makes this a worse poser than the last two Optimuses from Siege and Earthrise. And people keep telling me that if you push the head backwards or forwards or something, that it unlocks and frees up. But I just don't know what you're talking about. I've had the head shoot off this thing entirely several times trying to do this, and it hurts the shit out of my fingers to try it. Plus, it just won't work, so the head is still incredibly limited, basically only swiveling. I feel like people telling me this are just trolling. Transformation is pretty fun, and it's a different take on Optimus's conversion. And then the truck mode, that probably inspired the movie design, is pretty solid. It doesn't quite radiate the small penis energy of the blue and red flames. It's still edgy, but it's honest in its edginess. And the trailer is cool, though I don't know if I should count that in its favor as it's an accessory. Next, Iguanus, an awesome little core boy with a really interesting concept. Taking the Pretender shell and deciding that the far more iconic look of that is the actual robot mode was inspired. I don't know whether or not to make it more or less accurate to the classic interpretation, so let's just say that it's less and then give it bonus points anyways. And it works out to being one of the most posable core figures we've ever gotten, with solid ranges on everything and really good ankles. The transformation is interesting for a figure of its size, but this thing does have one drawback, and it's just the alt mode doesn't have any clear handlebars. Kind of forgivable on a vehicle that drives itself, but it still has a seat, so this should have something to hold onto for a passenger, and without handlebars, this just doesn't feel finished. Skywarp. This is just Starscream again in black. I don't feel like discussing it further other than to say it's not a bad figure, but it's still probably going to end up low in these rankings. Kickback, a figure that really surprised me. I was fully expecting this thing to be boring beyond belief, and to be fair, it is, but at the same time, it's so well made that I don't wind up caring. This thing feels spectacular. Out of all of Legacy, this is the one that probably radiates its quality directly through your hands the most. And the robot mode is almost screen perfect. There's some weird use of clear plastic here, and I would love to see a video where someone disassembles this thing so we can see what's inside his chest, but outside of the shoulders being too far off the body, I wouldn't call any of this wrong, just a strange decision. It also poses slightly better than I anticipated. I love more range on the knees, and the arms do look a little funny while bent, but at least they max out the range scales. Transformation is about as boring as it comes. You are barely doing anything. You're just kind of bending the elbows and spinning the head. I'm not going to hammer this for how little fun it is, but it is a negative feature. And the alt mode is close enough. The biggest problem is the head of the bug, which is the wrong color, and you convert it the lamest way possible, with a flap just covering up the robot face. I don't know how to feel about this mode. It's doing so very little, and yet it's not bothering to get it 100% right. It's like 90% the way there, it's just missing those final touches it doesn't have an excuse not to get. Skids is another surprisingly good one. Mine has a horrible arm defect, but outside that, it's a solidly built mold. I can say that with confidence since I have the burnout, and that one's fine. It looks pretty close to the character, it's a little short and squat, but that's not a big deal. Probably the biggest negative is the plate on the back of his head, which shouldn't be there, but overall this is another really accurate one. Posability is pretty average. I honestly don't have any strong feelings about any of its joints. Transformation is just the Siege Prowl's transformation in a bulkier form factor. Bumper lifts up, panel covers head hole, shoulders hinge in with the wheels on them forming the front tires with the arms laying along the inside around the head. Torso and legs scrunch together with the shins and the feet forming the back window and rear of the car, and the doors close around the sides. It's a fun one, it's just old hat at this point. And then the alt mode is a great little awful car. I hate hatchbacks, they're so hideous, but this is basically perfect for what it wants to be. So I can't hold that against it, no matter how much I may want to. Then there's the first Stunticon, Dragstrip. And unfortunately, as you can tell by my latest review, he was not indicative of what the rest of the team would be like. Dragstrip is excellent, looking pretty accurate to the character, only taking liberties in a few spots, like giving him an actual crotch, and I think most of us would agree that that's an improvement. The shoulder tires are kind of stupid, and I hate them in a weird way, but that doesn't really detract from the whole. Posability is once again very average. Legacy overall does kind of suffer from only reaching the bare minimum on the posability. Obviously, that means that none of them are bad at it, but they are all far from inspiring. Transformation on this figure is the first in the line that I would describe as great. It's really interesting. It does a lot different, plus the way it integrates with the combined mode is awesome. So it's safe to say that I find this part to be a highlight of the figure. And then the alt mode is pretty much just as good as the robot mode. It looks exactly right as far as I can tell, turning into that weird either dragster or Formula 1 car. I assume it's Formula 1, but the name makes it confusing. And now I think I kind of want to go over both Prime characters at once, which brings me to something that I've been thinking about for a while. The Prime figures from Legacy have a weirdly inconsistent ethos to them. All of them look incorrect in different ways. You got Knockout from Wave 2, who's a retool while the others aren't, and they did the best they could to make it look about right, but there was just no way to wrangle Knockout's robot mode out of Jazz's. But what I find far more interesting is the two from the first wave, because they are weirdly opposed. You have Bulkhead, who doesn't look like Bulkhead, but feels like Bulkhead. Then you have RC, who looks exactly like RC, but doesn't feel like RC. No, really, this looks exactly like her. The sculpt isn't even botched like I used to think. This is just RC from Prime. In order to show you why that's true, I'm going to have to edit this picture a bit. Now, I'm going to do this as shittily as possible, just to drive home the point of how not different this is to what she looked like in the show. To make RC stop looking weird, you cut off the tire kibble on the sides of her legs, then you take the whole image and you just stretch it. And lastly, you move the hips up into the pelvis. Does this look bad? Yes, it's a shitty photo manipulation I spent 5 seconds on. Does it have exactly RC's build now? Also yes. It's not that the figure ever looked wrong, it's just that they squashed it and then the hips got mounted too low as part of the transformation. But basically all the sculpting she is supposed to have is here. And the result is that the figure looks like her, but it doesn't feel like her. And don't you try to argue at me, you know who you are, that this is a G1ification. This is not what anyone in G1 looked like. Here is RC, here is Nightbird. They look like this, not like this. What exactly is it about squished proportions that you think makes not Chromia here look more G1 when the sculpting is overall more like Prime? And ultimately, despite my initial positive review, I tend to say that RC is pretty much the embodiment of 5 out of 10. She looks okay, not cool, not bad, okay. She poses okay, not well, not bad, okay. She transforms okay, not fun, not awful, okay. And then her alt mode is pretty good. I almost wonder if they sacrificed the proportions just to get the form factor of the motorcycle down. And then Bulkhead is just a rocking figure. Once again, this doesn't look like the character outside of the head, but it feels like him. It captures his essence. So, while it may be less accurate than RC and a lot of other characters, it does make me want to give him a pass on this front. And at the same time, it also just looks super cool. And while it's a shame that one of the Transformers' heavier set characters got skinnied up, it does kind of represent a whole new thing now. I mean, how many Cybertronians do you know of who used to be fit like a hand-egg player in their youth, but then their metabolism took a shit and they put on a lot of weight when they got older? Bulkhead is now our much-needed dad-tabolism representation in the Transformers. Posability is once again pretty basic. He's got some more in most of his joints than normal, but he's not escaping the Wave 1 curse of being unimpressive here. He's just nice at it. Transformation is also pretty good. Negative points for the parts forming, but it is doing just about its best outside of that, and the parts forming is not fully necessary. It looks a bit worse without it, but it's not ruined if you lose that part. And then the alt mode is cool as shit, and really clever. It feels like a mixture between his APC origins and his regular truck mode. Despite the initial appearances, like those renders were awful, this thing was absolutely made with love. So what's the best? As promised, Hot Rod is the worst, but we all knew that. If we aren't counting him, then I'd probably have to say that RC is the worst. To be clear, that doesn't make her bad, but she lacks any kind of positive identity. She's got a pretty good motorcycle mode, and outside that, she lacks anything you can really point to as a positive or negative feature. This figure just kind of exists. Then the middle of this list gets really tough, but I probably gotta go with my boy Laser Prime. He's got nothing to be accurate to, and while I do think that it's cool enough looking to make up for that, it does get in its own way too much. Like, it's hard to look as cool as he should when his posability is fully hampered by shoulders that barely work because the pylons are choking him to death. And then the transformation in alt mode try to make up for that, but this is the one figure that's good, yet still has real flaws that it needs to try to overcome, where the other figures pretty much don't have those problems. Then I'll go with the Little Skywarp. He's okay and doesn't have any issues. Next up, I gotta go with Kickback, and that's really just because of the remaining figures, he's the only one really doing something wrong. Robot mode looks great. Posability isn't worse than the rest, but the transformation is boring, and an alt mode that has no real excuse to not get it perfect when so little is asked of it and its transformation. Just get rid of the silver visor and don't have the face only covered by a panel. If the head swapped out for one that was inside the chest, I'd probably have to rate this overall higher, but I guess it's still up there for this list. Then I'll go with skids. It looks good and accurate, poses the same as any of them, transformation is standard but a fun one, and the alt mode is perfect for what it's trying to be. Not an incredibly inspiring figure, but one that does basically everything well. Number 3 of the line is Iguanus. The robot mode and its blending with the Pretender shell is a super cool idea. It looks pretty accurate, though not perfect when compared to its comic counterpart, and it looks cool on its own. Posability might just be higher than the wave average, which is hilarious when this is a Legends figure. Honestly, you can make a good argument for this taking the number 1 spot. The transformation is pretty good, trying some new and fun stuff, and the alt mode is okay. It's flawed in more ways than just the missing handlebars, but that's part of its charm. And the only thing holding this mode back is the lack of said handlebars. And then the last two are pretty goddamn hard to put into order here. Dragstrip is more accurate. Bulkhead looks way cooler. Bulkhead poses way better, with actual wrists and more range on all of his limbs. Dragstrip transforms way better. Bulkhead is good on that front, but Dragstrip is great. And then both figures have fantastic alt modes. Is it fair to say that Dragstrip's value as a Combiner team member drags him down, now that we know that Wild Rider's mold sucks fat dick? There are literally people who commented on the last review saying that they were now fully divesting themselves from the Stunticons, selling off the ones that they already had after experiencing Wild Rider. That's how lame that fucker is. 2 really enjoyable members of the team ruined to the point of not even being wanted anymore by one member who just flat sucked. Okay, here's what I'll do, since I'd actually say that these two are pretty dead evenly tied. Normally, I don't take accessories into account, but I need a tiebreaker. And Bulkhead's stuff is actually pretty sweet. He comes with more, it's more varied, he has more paint, he's a much bigger figure. Honestly, I'd say that Bulkhead brings the value a lot harder than Dragstrip. There, that feels more fair than holding the other figure against him. Dragstrip is now our very close number 2, but Bulkhead is the best. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.